Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new edition of Gravitas that comes to you right before the start of a brand new year. And right as the year 2024 draws to a close, tonight we get you a special Gravitas year-end edition that looks ahead into the future, into the year 2025, while reflecting on the past. My name is Molly Gambhir. Stay tuned as we focus on the power plays that defined 2024, the wars that are continuing into 2025, the weapons that will redefine warfare. It's been a year of deaths. Can peace ever return to West Asia, to Ukraine? That's the question. As Vladimir Putin marks 25 years in office, we tell you the story of the leader who transformed a lost superpower. What is India's space vision for 2025? Can Xi Jinping's China conquer Taiwan? We tell you about the forgotten, brutal wars of Africa and get you a special report on Jasprit Bumrah, the sports genius of the year. All this and more. We are starting off with the wars that dominated the headlines in 2024. They may pause in 2025, but the question is, will peace return in our lifetimes? Before these parts of the world even forget what peace looks like? The sheer devastation has resulted in thousands dying in wars. Will the thousands who have lost babies and young husbands and brothers and sisters ever forgive and forget? How are they supposed to turn the page and start a new year? How are they supposed to start afresh? The wounds of Palestine, Israel, Lebanon, Ukraine, Russia are far too deep. The scars will not disappear. These young lives have been shaped by bombings, displacement, the unrelenting trauma of war. Will the present generation ever forgive those who have robbed them of their childhoods, their families, their homeland? Ukraine, once hailed for its resilience, now stands at the brink of an uncertain future. The battlefield depicting a grim picture, to say the least. There are various reports highlighting how Ukrainian troops, once celebrated for all their grit, are now utterly exhausted and devastated by the Russian forces. Earlier this month, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said approximately 43,000 Ukrainian soldiers have lost their lives since the war started, depicting the scale of casualties in this 3-year-long war. The Kremlin does not officially disclose casualty figures, but the figures are likely to be on the scale of casualties in Ukraine. Both sides have used mercenaries or, in Russia's case, sent about 10,000 troops from North Korea, tipping the scales further in Russia's favor in a way, who have reportedly captured over 2,350 square kilometers of territory in eastern Ukraine this year alone and marked key Ukrainian regions like Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, Zaporizhia as Moscow's stated objectives for the year 2025. Across 2024, Volodymyr Zelensky repeated pleas to Western allies for more support. Advanced weapons like British Storm Shadow missiles, American ATACMS were supplied to Kiev. Yesterday, the United States announced nearly $6 billion in additional military and budget assistance for Ukraine. As per a Reuters report, in fact, the U.S. Congress has approved $175 billion in total assistance for Ukraine since the war started in February 2022. One reason why the wars might pause is because even allies of Ukraine are exhausted by the continuing demands. But the Ukrainian army reportedly finds itself stretched to the breaking point. Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur who will lead the Department of Government Efficiency in the Trump 2.0 administration, reacted to Joe Biden's recent aid announcement for Ukrainian military aid on the platform X, seemingly mocking Zelensky by calling him, quote-unquote, an all-time champ. Now, his comment perhaps underscores growing frustration levels in America. As per experts, Ukraine is losing this war and Russia's advances have been relentless. The creation of a new map, in a way, with expanded Russian territories, they say, seems inevitable, as Moscow has made it clear that it is determined to redraw Ukraine's borders, cementing its dominance in the region. Will this result in the installation of a pro-Russian president in Kiev in 2025? Perhaps backed by President-elect Donald Trump? When Trump returns to power, it is expected that he will press for a ceasefire settlement that favors Russia.
What should Zelensky, if anything, be prepared to give up to end this war?
He should be prepared to make a deal. That's all. Got to be a deal. No, got to be a deal. Too many people being killed. That is a war that's too many people. Got to make a deal. And Putin has to make a deal.
What deal would you
Putin
suggest?
has to make a deal, and Putin would have never gone in if I was president.
You see, the implications for Zelensky are dire. His political future, after all, is shrouded in doubt, and many experts are questioning whether he will survive the fallout of what increasingly looks like a lost cause. Trump, remember, has pledged to end the war in 24 hours. Now, let's just turn to West Asia, where the suffering has been profound, to say the least. Major stakeholders, both regional and international, continue to eye territorial gains, vying for control and influence over a region rich in strategic influence. A direct byproduct of this has been a devastating escalation in violence across Gaza, Syria, Lebanon, leaving thousands dead. According to the UN, in Gaza alone, over 45,000 Palestinians have lost their lives. The situation in Syria is also harrowing. As per the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, at least 4,000 people have lost their lives this year, 2024. According to the Lebanese Health Ministry, the war with Israel has claimed more than 3,000 lives so far. As winter tightens its icy grip, the toll continues to rise. So does the suffering. Thousands of displaced families are now facing death from exposure. In Gaza, where temperatures have plummeted, at least 6 infants have lost their lives due to cold-related illnesses across Gaza this week alone. Imagine that. International aid organizations warn that without immediate intervention, this number could double. It is clear that the human cost in the Russia-Ukraine war and West Asia is staggering. A generation has been lost to war, to conflicts. For the children caught in these wars, the future appears bleak. Ceasefires have been brokered and broken. Civilians continue to pay the ultimate price. This is the year of death, a year that has shattered hopes for peace in both Russia-Ukraine war and West Asia, and the road ahead only appears dark and uncertain as of now, leaving us with the same question. Can peace ever truly return? With no clear path to peace as of now and the conflict escalating on all fronts, the answer seems more elusive than ever. The only certainty in these wars is uncertainty, and that will unfortunately continue into 2025. And what's also certain, though, is the fact that the fighter jets and drones of 2025 promise unparalleled destruction. They are agents of devastation designed to dominate and annihilate. Let's just start off with China's Baidi White Emperor. This 6th-generation stealth jet is a monster in the air. It combines supersonic speeds, a tailless design, and diamond-shaped wings for extreme agility. Equipped with advanced stealth technology, it can even evade detection while carrying a massive internal payload of air-to-ground munitions. What is its mission? To strike hard and fast without leaving a trace. But it's not just a plane, it's a brain. You see, AI powers the Bedi, enabling it to assess threats, choose maneuvers, and even execute missions autonomously. In a war zone, this means faster responses, fewer mistakes, and deadlier outcomes. It doesn't fight alone either. The Bedi syncs seamlessly with China's combat networks, coordinating with other aircraft, ground units, and naval forces. China's drone arsenal is equally terrifying. The WZ-9 Falcon is a stealth drone built to overwhelm defenses. Imagine swarms of these supersonic machines, each armed with precision-guided munitions, descending on an enemy. In a way, this strategy redefines air superiority. Meanwhile, the United States has unleashed the B-21 Raider. This stealth bomber makes its predecessor, the B-2 Spirit, look like ancient history. The B-21, B-21 can launch hypersonic weapons, evade advanced radar, and even operate autonomously. Just picture it raining destruction while remaining invisible in a way. This is not defense, it's pure offense. And then there is Russia's Su-75 Checkmate, a lightweight, cost-effective fighter jet designed for export. It could end up in the hands of multiple countries, wreaking havoc in many battlefields. Russia also, by the way, recently launched the Okhotnik, the Sukhoi S-70 Okhotnik B drone, a stealth UAV that's already proven lethal in combat scenarios. In fact, Turkey is also making waves with its Bayraktar Kizilema drone, merging drone agility with fighter jet firepower. It's fast, heavily armed, and capable of launching from carriers. Turkey's earlier Bayraktar TB2 reportedly had major impact on the conflicts in the Russia-Ukraine war and the Caucasus. Now, the Kizilelma promises to elevate its dominance in drone warfare. India is stepping up with its Ghatak stealth drone. This project symbolizes India's ambition to become a self-reliant military powerhouse. Its stealth capabilities and lethal payloads making it a formidable addition to the global arms race. Overall, these machines are not just innovations. They are more than that, a lot more. They symbolize destruction. Countries are investing billions to make their air forces unstoppable. These technologies don't just fight battles, they win wars. They dominate the land, sea, air, and even cyberspace. In a no-holds-barred war, these killer machines will not just fight, they will annihilate. So the next global conflict may not just be about boots on the ground, it will be about who controls the skies. Fighter jets and drones are no longer futuristic. They are very much here, and they are deadly. The countries that master them will dictate the terms of war and peace. And as the year 2025 starts, Russian President Vladimir Putin also marks 25 years of being in office. And in a New Year's Eve speech, President Putin praised his country's achievements, saying Russians should be proud of what Russia has done during his quarter century in power. Our next report decoding and telling you more about the story of the leader who transformed a lost superpower. Take a look.
The dawn of 2025 marks not just Putin's 25th year in power, but potentially the beginning of Russia's resurgent century. As Ukraine enters its fourth year of conflict, despite thousands of sanctions imposed by the West, Russia emerges stronger and increasingly influential in reshaping the global order. On the global stage, Putin positioned himself as a staunch defender of Russian sovereignty. from Clinton to Trump, from Blair to Starmer, from Merkel to Scholz. Leaders came and went, but Russia remains firmly under Putin's control. Putin's persona is larger than life, built on carefully crafted displays of strength, discipline and control. Whether flying a strategic bomber, diving to the depths of Lake Baikal in a submarine, or hunting tigers in Siberia, these stunts aren't mere theatrics. They symbolize his projection of dominance, both domestically and internationally.
Quite simply, we are stronger than all the others because we are right. Strength lies in truth. When Russia is right, she is invincible.
His ability to blend calculated pragmatism with moments of personal flares, such as playing the piano while awaiting Chinese President Xi Jinping, underscores the charisma that has kept him at the center of global attention for a quarter of a century. Despite thousands of Western sanctions, Russia's economy shows remarkable adaptability. Russian gas finds new markets in Asia, while parallel import schemes ensure European luxury goods still flow into Moscow stores. From Chinese yuan to Indian rupees, Russia's trade bypasses the dollar system entirely. The so-called economic blitzkrieg that was meant to cripple Russia instead accelerated its pivot east. A key feature of Putin's presidency is his adaptability. He has shown the ability to navigate complex domestic and international challenges, from economic reforms in the early 2000s to managing geopolitical crises in later years. This adaptability, combined with his deep understanding of Russian history and culture, has allowed him to maintain a strong connection with his citizens. Western critics have accused Putin of suppressing free speech and targeting opposition members. But for Russians, he remains the strongman who is reasserting Russia's growth and stability in an era of global uncertainty. As the world watches, the Putin century may well prove to be a defining chapter in Russia's history, a time when a leader transformed a lost superpower into a confident global force.
The Indian Space Agency, ISRO, signed off 2024 with a rocket launch late on the 30th of December. What a way to end the year. In 2025, Indian Space Agency, the Indian Space Research Organization, is looking at a busier year with around 10 launches planned. Here's a detailed report on India's space vision for the next year.
Barely 10 days into January 2025, the Indian Space Research Organization, or ISRO, is looking to perform a stunning and sophisticated feat in space. It is known as satellite docking, where two separate satellites autonomously approach each other and merge into one singular unit. The mission is known as SpadeX.
2, 1, 0.
It was launched on December 30th as ISRO's final launch of the year. This is a fundamental technology that has to be mastered to build a space station, which India intends to commence from 2028 onwards. So far, only the US, Russia, China and Europe have performed in-space docking. By the end of January, ISRO is also looking to launch a next-generation navigation satellite known as NVS-02. This is part of India's NAVIC constellation of satellites which offer indigenous GPS-like services within Indian borders and 1,500 kilometers from the Indian borders. NAVIC satellites serve both civilian and military users. In the coming years, India is looking to launch at least 3 more of these NVS series satellites. All of these satellites will be launched on India's medium lifter rocket GSLV Mark II. The world's most powerful Earth imaging satellite for civilian purposes will be launched in 2025. This is a joint effort between ISRO and NASA. The satellite is called NISAR, NASA-ISRO Synthetic Aperture Radar. It is meant to study the effects of climate change, the melting polar ice caps, shrinking forest cover, and other intricate changes on the Earth's surface. The satellite is presently undergoing testing at ISRO's U.R. Rao Satellite Center in Bengaluru. Once fully ready, it will be launched aboard a GSLV Mark II rocket from India's spaceport Satish Dhawan Space Center. ISRO, which has been preparing throughout 2024 for the Gaganyaan astronaut missions, will carry out the maiden Gaganyaan mission in early 2025. ISRO has already commenced the assembly of the human-rated launch vehicle Mark III, which is going to carry out the mission. This will be an uncrewed mission that will carry a humanoid robot to space. ISRO hopes to perform 3 such test flights before sending Indian astronauts to space and returning them safely. As the Indian research organization gears up for 2025, WION's Siddharth MP spoke to the ISRO chief D.R. Somananth.
As far as ISRO's long-term planning is concerned, now you are actually building vehicles at a better pace with partnership with Indian industry. So because you've mentioned that at least 3-4 missions per rocket. So what are you doing to ramp up the pace?
So we are looking at how we can ramp up by a little more investment, and also look at how the commercial models can be generated. So we are looking at how private-public partnership models can be built where industry can invest to create more assured orders. So primarily that is one part. Second is within ISRO also there are limitations of manufacturing testing of engines and making it in numbers. So production lines are to be created to accelerate the number production, and this is a serious item in my agenda.
That was Dr. S. Somnath speaking to us from Sriharikota. Siddharth MP, WION World is One.
China's President Xi Jinping says no one can stop the unification with Taiwan. He made this strong statement just a short while back during his address to the country in a New Year speech. We now explore and discuss how the prospect of invading Taiwan now seems to be a looming reality fueled by Beijing's military buildup and President Xi Jinping's unyielding ambition to bring Taiwan under his control. Take a look.
China is tightening the noose around Taiwan. The island is facing ominous signs that the mighty Chinese military may soon invade the island nation. With tensions simmering in the Taiwan Strait, the question isn't if China will act, but how and when. In the last 12 months, Chinese ships have launched multiple drills showcasing its overwhelming military might. These are images from December. Dozens of Chinese warships and other vessels deployed around the island. Around 50 Chinese fighter jets zoomed near its airspace. The warning is loud and clear. Taipei says this was one of China's biggest ever military exercises. In October, China used a record 153 military aircraft in war games around Taiwan. China's strategy is methodical and multi-pronged. US says Beijing's own planning documents show President Xi Jinping has ordered the Chinese military to be ready to take Taiwan by force should efforts to reunify the island by other means fail. The idea was clearly spelt out by the Chinese president.
Realizing the complete reunification of the motherland is the common aspiration of all the sons and daughters of the Chinese nation. And as the essence of national rejuvenation, we must implement the party's overall strategy for resolving the Taiwan issue in the new era.
While Beijing views democratically governed Taiwan as its own territory, a claim the government in Taipei rejects, saying only Taiwan's people can decide their future. Experts point out that the plan for reunification has been set into motion by China.
In recent years, particularly the past 2 or 3 years, military exercises have increasingly reflected Xi Jinping's directive that troops must train where they are expected to fight. These recent drills, whether conducted at sea or in the air, carry a pronounced sense of real combat, readiness and operational intent.
It's very annoying. These incidents keep happening repeatedly. Each time we have to deploy fighter jets for monitoring, which raises concerns about whether the Defense Ministry has the capacity to respond consistently. Or will it eventually become a case of the boy who cried wolf, where frequent occurrences lead to a sense of numbness among the public?
The US is Taiwan's most important backer and biggest supplier of arms, but has long maintained strategic ambiguity when it comes to putting boots on the ground to defend the island. As we step into 2025, China's looming invasion isn't just a battle of troops and technology, it's a political gamble. The costs would be astronomical for all sides, with Taiwan enduring devastation. The US and their allies are forced to take a stand, and China risking internal instability.
For months now, Bangladesh has been synonymous with turmoil and chaos thanks to its persistent political and economic crisis. The country is ending the year with Muhammad Yunus at the helm, but what will the year 2025 look like? Can Yunus survive this test? He seems to be failing already. Rather, should he survive, given Bangladesh's economic mess? Does he have any plan, or is he really as clueless as he seems?
Bangladesh has been in the grip of massive turmoil. Earlier in 2024, students mobilized against what they considered unfair job quotas. What started as a student-led protest against the Sheikh Hasina-led government soon transformed into a mass anti-government campaign after the security forces cracked down on protesters in the month of July. The Hasina government, which was elected to power back in January and grabbed a fourth straight term in the elections, was ousted from power. This was marked by violence and widespread agitation, as hundreds got killed. What followed was chaos, confusion and crisis. Bangladesh is currently on the brink of an economic crisis, and it is upon the interim administration to revive the ailing economy, besides restoring peace and order. Which means a great deal of onus is on Yunus, an economist turned banker himself, to steer the country back to normalcy. But can he? The urgent need is to address challenges such as high inflation and rising unemployment. Currently, Bangladesh faces an 11.6% inflation rate, the highest in 12 years, with food inflation reaching a record 14.1%. Add to that ballooning external debt and falling exports after a steady fall in foreign exchange, all signs that Bangladesh's economy is in dire straits. Bangladesh has also seen an acute power crisis, deeply affecting its crucial ready-made garment industry, which is one of the world's largest. There has been growing concern over attacks on the Hindu minority in Bangladesh and the need to ensure their safety. According to the Ministry of External Affairs, as per data available from human rights organizations, as of December 8, 2024, the number of cases of violence against Hindus and other minorities amount to 2,200. Can Yunus fix the mess Bangladesh finds itself in? 2024 is clearly ending on a bad note for him. What Bangladesh needs at this point is strong leadership and robust policies. What it needs is an administration that can lead by example. Come 2025, it will be a litmus test for Muhammad Yunus. one that he must pass, or this mess will continue to spiral out of control with dangerous consequences.
It's the end of a year and the beginning of a new one. Some believe it's a time to forget and forgive. But does US President-elect Donald Trump believe in doing that? Not quite, it would seem. Why else would America's allies be as fearful of him as America's foes? You see, Trump's ascension to power has possibly unnerved many leading allies of America, most notably in Europe, and left them rather anguished time and again. Look at the reactions that have been trickling in. In fact, Trump has also been labeled the disruptor-in-chief. Fears from his first term have been refreshed that Trump could end up being harsher on US friends than he is on adversaries. That's something that we will talk about later, but for now, let's just talk about what Trump should be fearful of himself. The news from inside America is not pleasant. What are we talking about? Poverty, deep decay within the system. How far does the rot run? You see, America is an economic giant to the rest of the world, but that's not what the picture is looking like on the ground in many ways, as millions of Americans are having trouble paying their bills and saving money, even if they are not living in extreme poverty. This is according to a research study published by the Urban Institute. Low-income Americans are increasingly showing signs of escalating financial strain, like falling behind on rent and struggling to buy food. Can Trump prove to be a disruptor in a way that he can fix this domestic mess? Take a look at this report that focuses on the surge in poverty in so-called superpower America.
The number of Americans living in poverty, according to the nation's official definition, fell slightly to about 36.8 million in 2023. That is based on the annual Census Bureau report. Data from Propel Inc., a benefit software provider, showed that 42% of families receiving the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Programs or SNAP benefits missed meals in August, and 55% ate less because they couldn't afford food, more than double last year's share. Those on SNAP are typically households with income at or below the poverty line. The data also highlights households' deteriorating financial situation. Since July, a growing number of low-income families have had their utilities cut off because they could not pay the bill or cover their rent. Among individuals who were receiving the increased SNAP benefits, more than two-thirds stated they were also in debt. Justin King, policy director of Propel, said, and I quote, "There's a lot of hardship being experienced by people with lower incomes right now. We've seen a lot of cutbacks in safety net benefits this year, and we're seeing the impact." The research adds to the other recent economic data pointing to a deterioration in consumer finances and attitudes, especially among low-income families, due to the slowing of labor market demand, the drying up of savings, and the withdrawal of pandemic-driven social assistance. More than a third of respondents in the Household Pulse poll found it extremely or somewhat difficult to afford the necessities. A census report shows the poverty rate in the United States saw an increase in 2023. The Census Bureau reports that the nation's poverty rate, when adjusted for government support like food assistance and tax credits, edged up to 12.9% in 2023 from 12.4% in 2022. This indicates that while incomes rose, poverty remains a growing concern for many households. A separate report from the Urban Institute showed financial problems have been significantly more prevalent due to the increasing cost of living over the last few years. David Jones, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Community Service Society of New York, one of the study's funders, said, We've so over-focused on the poverty line that we may have missed that for the first time in America, families are having to look at a worse future for themselves and their children. Jones added that this is a step backward from what was the essential American dream. The study did find that growing costs of living were not the primary cause of economic insecurity, but a lack of financial resources. A supplementary measure that incorporates government transfers showed an increase from 2021 to 2023. The results show that there are more people of color who are suffering than white people. Nearly 70% of black and Hispanic Americans do not have enough money to pay all of their bills and put some away for the future, but only around 25% of white Americans are unable to do so. For now, the financial trouble among average Americans is a risk that the superpower needs to look at more closely and address as soon as possible.
We now talk about the brutal, forgotten wars of Africa that have left behind a trail of death and destruction across the continent. These battles stretch from Mali in the west to Somalia on the Eastern Horn. Africa has entered a new era of warfare, yet this rise in violence has largely gone unnoticed in a way, overshadowed by the wars in Ukraine and West Asia. Take a look.
Africa's ongoing conflicts are exacerbating governance crises across the continent, further destabilizing already fragile regions and creating opportunities for foreign exploitation through proxy forces, resource trafficking, and manipulation of information. Militant Islamist violence and fatalities in Africa reached record highs in 2024, largely due to the ongoing extreme violence in the Sahel. This region alone accounted for over half of all militant Islamist activity on the continent, with fatalities nearly tripling since 2020 to around 11,000. Groups such as the Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslim, in coalition with Islamic State in the Greater Sahara, have escalated their attacks and expanded their control over territories in Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, advancing further south and west. Foreign authoritarian actors, primarily Russia, China and increasingly Iran, have facilitated the democratic backsliding witnessed in Africa in recent years through alleged disinformation, direct election interference, deployment of mercenaries, support for extra-constitutional seizures of power and undermining of the United Nations. These foreign actors have attempted to prop up undemocratic authorities and normalize authoritarianism while paralyzing popular sovereignty as a means of expanding their influence on Africa. The conflict between Sudan's military factions has turned the country into the world's largest displacement crisis. Since the war began in April 2023, over 11.5 million people have been displaced internally, and more than 2.3 million have fled the country. Food shortages, including famine, are reportedly claiming hundreds of lives daily, while an additional 3 million people are facing acute food insecurity in 2024. Sudan's collapse has sent shockwaves through the already fragile region, exacerbating conflicts and political instability in neighboring states. The internal crises in Libya, Chad, the Central African Republic, South Sudan and Ethiopia have all been further complicated by Sudan's turmoil. The Congo Basin rainforests, which account for around 70% of Africa's forest cover, are the world's most vital terrestrial carbon sink. These forests are also essential to the water cycles that support the Nile River Basin and West Africa. However, only 14% of the region's land is protected, and since 2000, 30% of its forest cover has been lost, primarily due to unregulated commercial logging and mining. Currently, the forests are shrinking by 1 to 5% annually. Transnational criminal networks and armed militant groups such as the M23 are exploiting weak forest management to plunder this valuable resource. To ensure better protection, improved forest management is necessary, which includes enhanced awareness of forest domains and better coordination among countries in a regional strategy to combat transnational crime and illicit financial flows. In East Africa, Kenya made headlines after President William Ruto proposed an increase in taxes. The proposal sparked days of protests which escalated into widespread unrest and activist movements that garnered global attention, with many young people demanding Ruto's resignation. Fueled by economic grievances and ongoing frustration over scrapped tax hikes, the protests turned violent, resulting in casualties and numerous injuries. Demonstrators in cities across the country called for systematic reforms to tackle corruption and poor governance. And finally, protests in Mozambique have negatively impacted the country's tourism industries, with some travelers postponing their visits and others cancelling altogether. 2 Australian companies have announced the closure of their operations and their exit from Mozambique. The southern African nation has been engulfed in violence since the controversial presidential election on October 9th. The protests led by Venancio Mondlane stemmed from his claims that the ruling Frelimo party rigged the election. Meanwhile, South Africa has kept its Lebombo main border crossing with Mozambique closed, as Mondlane remains in hiding in South Africa. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
And how could we not talk about India's bright growth story, which is still the narrative of global expectations for next year? However, the glamour has eased somewhat in recent months. Clearly, the risks to economic growth have risen, with consumer and government spending being the biggest catalyst for the momentum loss in a way. Already tight household wallets have taken a hit from the surge in prices of just about everything. Take a look at this report to understand if bad news will outweigh good news for the Indian economy in 2025.
India's long-term growth trajectory is still seen intact. With an expected 6.5% growth rate over the next 6 years, the country is poised to maintain its position as the world's fastest-growing major economy. However, the country saw a significant decline in economic activity this year. India's economic outlook for 2025-2026 shows modest growth, with GDP predictions ranging from 6.4 to 6.6%. That is significantly down from the above 7% projections from earlier. In comparison, when South Korea, Japan and China were experiencing tremendous growth, they maintained growth rates of about 8%. The major concern is whether a growth rate of about 6.5% will be sufficient for a nation that needs to create almost 8 million jobs yearly until 2030. Additionally, it is unclear if this growth rate will be sufficient to address widening wealth gaps and provide opportunities for mobility across generations. But there are clear positives for the economy. The International Monetary Fund still projects India to be the lone bright star in an otherwise gloomy global backdrop. Spending on government programs is already seeing an increase after the election. Banks' cash reserves with the Reserve Bank of India have been reduced, allowing them more freedom with their money. The central bank is expected to switch to an easing policy soon to bolster the country's growth story. With the state election calendar relatively empty, there's an opportunity for changes in 2025. According to Goldman Sachs research, India's economy will be able to weather global shocks such as tariffs imposed by Trump's government. Analysts at the investment firm predict that India's GDP will continue to expand at a robust rate in the long run. Santanu Sengupta, chief India economist at Goldman Sachs Research, noted the structural long-term growth story for India remains intact, driven by favorable demographics and stable governance. However, the bank's analysts predict that 2025 will be a slowdown bit due to slowing government spending and a loss in credit growth momentum. One of the most pressing issues is inflation and its effect on demand and consumption. In its December bulletin, the RBI mentioned that manufacturing activity across sectors, petroleum products, iron, steel, and cement, was restrained. The central bank reported that mining activity contracted and reduced power consumption. Global variables such as changes in tariffs and commodity pricing, as well as weather unpredictability and agricultural production, add further uncertainty. The greatest threat to growth predictions is still interruptions to food supply caused by weather. Devendra Kumar Pant, chief economist at India Ratings and Research, said inflation remains a significant concern, with its impact on consumption and urban demand highlighted as a critical challenge. He emphasized that overall demand will remain subdued unless inflation stabilizes around 4 to 4.5%. The RBI has kept policy rates unchanged for the 11th consecutive meeting. That is because of the high and unpredictable food inflation, which is mostly caused by weather-related price shocks in vegetables. However, with demand slowing, price pressures are expected to come down to the RBI's target range. To counter the slowdown in demand, India is likely to boost consumption through personal income tax, as reported by Reuters, quoting government sources. However, that decision is likely to be taken only closer to the budget on February 1st, 2025. Will the middle class get any respite remains to be seen. For now, the risks seem to outweigh the positives for India's growth story.
On to the world of sport now, that saw several landmark moments in 2024. But when it comes to cricket, the year belonged to one man, Jasprit Bumrah. The Indian redefined the art of fast bowling this year, and his magic was hard to miss on multiple occasions. He is emerging as the front runner to be named India's Test captain after Rohit